This is Barry Zelma speaking for Zelma on Insurance on YouTube. I am an attorney who has retired from the practice of law and now spend my time as an insurance consultant, insurance expert witness, and author of various insurance books and treatises that should be useful to anyone involved in the insurance business. Since construction defect litigation involves insurance and insurance companies and a great deal of expense, today I'd like to talk about the use of construction experts. In every construction defect case, the standard of care and its breach must generally be shown through expert testimony. Lay testimony is sometimes sufficient where the defects are of common knowledge, but when the defects are of an esoteric nature, require the use of licensed professionals, standard of care evidence in negligence matters generally must be provided by the expert testimony of people like structural engineers and geotechnical engineers, electricians, plumbers, whatever is something that is not part of common knowledge. Expert testimony regarding a standard of care is generally not required to establish a breach of contract, rather than conduct beneath the standard of care. There are many experts involved, not only in the construction of a building, but also in the investigation of any defects that surface after a building is complete. A person faced with liability for a defective structure or a potentially dangerous structure should consider involving various experts. Experts are able, therefore, to establish some of the following: the existence of defects in a structure, the extent to which the defects pose a danger to property or to the occupants, procedures to eliminate the defects, and additional services or experts needed to more accurately evaluate the situation. Experts and consultants may include any or all of the following professionals. The construction consultant. There are few schools that teach construction, except those that assist individuals to become licensed general contractors. Consequently, a construction consultant develops his or her expertise by a combination of education, training, and, more importantly, experience as a general contractor in the state where the property is located. He or she also usually has experience in evaluating the work of people in the construction trades. The construction consultant can also establish his or her credentials by earning a license to construct buildings and in fact doing so, and by being well read in the field of construction, publishing peer-reviewed articles and books in his or her fields of expertise, and testifying in court on the subject. A construction expert is a person with practical experience, rather than one whose knowledge comes from schooling alone. Such experts are considered to be the most effective in providing advice and in convincing a jury of the correctness of their advice and stated conclusions. I, in my practice, always preferred an expert with actual knowledge rather than one that was specifically a professor or someone with only educational credentials. Construction consultants often work in teams with other professionals, including management consultant, engineers, and experienced technicians. A construction consultant reports on the hazards and risks faced by the construction, causation in terms of property damage, conditions of or of defect or negligence, post-escrow non-disclosure, construction workmanship, compliance to regulations, damage repair necessities, replacement cost evaluation, building code requirements, and the standards within the industry of constructing the type of structure that was involved in the case. The consultant can also provide information concerning a contractor's performance and responsibilities, contract obligations, job health and safety, documents and plans, the existence of asbestos and its issues, moisture, water flow intrusion, fire, windstorm, or other construction damage and job site accidents. The consultant can also assist in the duty to comply with building codes and standards and the results of any investigation and evaluations of construction or design deficiencies to define required corrections. The construction consultant should also be highly experienced in the art and science of construction, contract claim analyses, with a thorough understanding of construction-related issues, industry practice, and risk evaluation and dispute resolution techniques. Construction consultant professionals know how to assess complex contractual disputes quickly and have the ability to express themselves clearly in a manner that is understandable to a judge or a jury of laypersons with no knowledge of construction. Sometimes a construction defect case requires the assistance of a structural engineer. Structural engineering is the science and art of designing and making with economy and elegance buildings, bridges, frameworks, and similar structures so that they can safely resist the forces to which they may be subjected. Structural engineering is a specialty within civil engineering. Civil engineers design highways, airports, train yards and terminals, wharves and ports, beaches, water treatment facilities, aqueducts, retaining walls for landscaping, and tunnels. The structural engineer learns how to do all these things as well, but then specializes in buildings and frameworks. Structural engineers often do work that includes some civil engineering. For example, a new building may need some retaining walls around a loading dock or a small bridge so the driveway can span a creek. Structural engineers design frameworks, including the structural framing, for all types of buildings, bridges, towers, and amusement rides. The structural engineer is responsible for the design of the beams, columns, walls, floors, roof, and foundation of a structure. The engineer also spends time working out the details of how it all fits and the connections that hold it all together. Sometimes some of this responsibility is shared with other members of the design team, like the architect or a civil engineer or an electrical engineer. The structural engineer works with architects, contractors, and other engineering specialties. One becomes a structural engineer by attending an accredited college or university that provides engineering training. After completing the college training, the new engineer studies under a licensed professional engineer, learning the practical aspects of the profession and studying for a licensing exam. The structural engineer can help a construction defect suit by establishing the cause or responsibility for a construction defect. A structural engineer can determine what is necessary to repair the structure to a sound condition and provide the information necessary for the construction consultant to prepare estimates of the cost to correct or repair the damage, and may also assume responsibility for ascertaining the nature and extent of the problem and designing an appropriate remedy. The structural engineer provides the expertise to allow a judge or jury to determine there was either no defect, or if there was a defect, who was responsible for the defect. The structural engineer, much like the construction consultant, but limited to the engineer's specific expertise, should be able to effectively determine who did what and when to the structural components, and produce plans and specifications that show the defects in the structural components of the structure. The structural engineer will also be able to provide the best available documented record of the original construction project as it relates to structural engineering issues, including calculations performed by the original engineer who helped build the structure in the first place, an examination of the project record in detail to establish compliance with the plans and specifications provided by the original structural engineer, a summary of all engineering documents, analysis of the original plans and specifications as compared to the structure as built and the soundness of the structure from an engineering standpoint, accurate as-built plans and structural calculations for review and testimony, identification of changes to the structural components of the property, graphic representation of impacts to the structural integrity of the building, and identification of individual contractors or subcontractors, actual compliance with the structural plans, specifications, and engineering calculations. The structural engineer will also be able to provide information about defects. The engineer should also be available to provide testimony at trial or arbitration if required, with analysis of the original as-planned structure, and prepare trial exhibits to support the testimony of other experts. The structural engineer should assist the litigant with the claim negotiation, with reports, graphical evidence, and cost summaries, development of a discovery plan, working to help establish facts through deposition, and providing information to refute technical evidence presented by the opposing side, and provide expert testimony as appropriate. There are other expert witnesses that can and will be necessary depending on the facts of the particular construction defect suit, including other types of engineers and even an insurance coverage or claims handling expert, if necessary. For further detail, consider acquiring my 8-volume book, Construction Defects and Insurance, available at my website, www.zalma.com, and click on the Insurance Claims Library, which shows not only my construction defect book, but other books available that I have written and that can be purchased either as a paperback or a Kindle book from Amazon.com.